Bertolt Brecht, a German playwright whose plays expressed his communist views, began writing during the Weimar Republic, but wrote for long after, and authored many plays representing German society under the Nazi regime. The play Fear and Misery of the Third Reich was one such play, which Brecht wrote as an anthology of scenes presenting different aspects of life under the regime, the theme of which was how lies had infiltrated all aspects of society and vitiated all relationships, even the most intimate. This video will use Scene 9, titled The Jewish Wife, to explain the technique that Brecht uses to show this theme. However, I believe it's important to very quickly cover how and why Brecht poorly represents the actual treatment of Jews in Nazi Germany, and why, so that any viewer does not make the mistake of thinking what Brecht displays is realistic to the Jewish experience. As many of you probably know, Adolf Hitler, leading Nazi Germany, blamed many things for the Germans' economic collapse following World War I. However, the peoples most targeted as responsible were the Jews. Following Hitler's rise to power, Brecht had fled Germany, fearing he'd be imprisoned or killed for his communist and anti-fascist views. As a communist, Brecht himself had alienated the Jewish peoples, as he saw them as an upper class, and showed this by having the main Jewish character, Judith, say that she has servants, and that if only she had voted communist, her ostracism wouldn't have happened. This betrayal of Judith, as well as the betrayal of little violence or punishment she faces as a Jew in Nazi Germany, has garnered much criticism, especially since the play was put on stage in Paris 1938, as this was 5 years after Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany for life, and had the President of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, issue the Reichstag's Brandverordnung, also known as the Reichstag Fire Decree, removing all rights and freedoms of the Jewish people, and beginning their mass arrest. A year later, Paul Hindenburg died, and Hitler combined the role of Chancellor and President into one job, naming himself Führer und Reichskanzler des deutschen Volkes, leader and Reich Chancellor of the German people. With these new powers, he expanded the concentration camps into small cities of terror, institutionalizing corporal punishments and beginning the process of turning the labor camps to death camps. Brecht had fled Germany as soon as Hitler was made Chancellor, so he may have seen Hitler's use of the Jews as a scapegoat to get himself in power, especially since when Brecht had fled, communists were also being put into the prison camps, just like Jews and other political criminals. Therefore, he may have seen them as being equally mistreated by the Nazis at that time. Plus, the deaths amounting at these camps, especially its Jewish residents, were not made public. However, Hitler's rise to the role of Führer, as well as the Reichstag Fire Decree, stripping Jewish peoples of their rights and freedoms, were public. Since he did not represent these lack of freedoms and personhood properly, Brecht's representation of Judith can be offensive, especially the amount of freedoms he shows her as having at this time. Although Brecht poorly displays the Jewish experience in Nazi Germany, I do find he does do an excellent job at showing how lies had infiltrated all aspects of society and vitiated all relationships, even the most intimate. Brecht's Fear and Misery of the Third Reich, Scene 9, titled The Jewish Wife, focuses on, as the title implies, a Jewish wife whose name is Judith Keith. Judith represented how lies had infiltrated every relationship she had, whether it was friend or family, through a series of calls and a final confrontation she has with her husband, in which the lies ultimately cause the end of a relationship. The technique that I believe Brecht uses to effectively show this infiltration of lies is Judith's call to characters of differing levels of social closeness to her and her husband, beginning with a mere work acquaintance of her husband's and ending with a call to the only person not connected through her husband and clearly a best friend of hers. With each call, the lies become more and more obvious to the audience. So Judith's series of calls, as said, begins with her husband's work acquaintance, who she refers to as Doctor and happens to play bridge with. Judith explains that she'll be leaving for Amsterdam, and explains this quite calmly and cheerfully talks of games and the weather, keeping up the appearance that she would return quickly to play games together again. In the second call, Judith calls one of her husband's friends. Judith explains that she'd be leaving for Amsterdam and once again keeps up the appearance that she would be returning quickly. However, this time she invites them to a social event at her house, assuring them that she'd be gone beforehand so they wouldn't have to socialize with her, in an attempt to improve her husband's social standing and end his ostracism. However, due to her attempt to bring these individuals who had ostracized her and her husband back into his life, it becomes more obvious to the audience that she intends to leave for a very long time, possibly forever. Obvious to the modern audience, we know that there's no way a Jewish person is coming back to Nazi Germany, but this was being put on in 1938 Paris, and Brecht clearly makes it seem like Judith and her husband are only facing ostracism from the community, and her husband may lose his job. Nothing about being rounded up into train cars to very likely be slaughtered or worked to death. So it is now that the audience would start to doubt Judith, especially since she kept up the appearance so well with her husband Fritz's work acquaintance. Judith, in fear of her husband Fritz's ability to take care of himself without her, decides to call his sister Gertrude next, immediately letting her know that she'd be leaving, but only for a very short time. Judith then asks Gertrude to come live with her husband, wanting her to take care of him, and gives Gertrude numerous instructions, and once again making it very apparent to the audience that she would be gone for a long time. In the next call, Judith calls a woman named Anna. As opposed to the other calls, Judith here opens with her first name, while previously having been announcing herself with her first and last name, showing right away to the audience that this is an intimate friend. Judith asks Anna and her husband Kurt to take care of Fritz, and Anna even requests to meet Judith at the train station before she leaves, once again showing that Anna is an incredibly close friend of Judith's. Finally, Judith assures Anna that she will write, although she's not even sure she can make it to Amsterdam, being one of the lies that she tells Anna before saying goodbye. Following this call, Judith breaks down. She begins smoking and then letting loose with the truth that she couldn't tell anyone on the phone. She's upset and frustrated about her husband's ostracism and attempts to begin preparing how she would tell her husband that she's leaving, bringing up the ostracism that they face and asking him to have the revelation that he must abandon her, especially in light of gossip, saying the walls have ears, fearing that people tell the Gestapo everything. For once, while Judith is alone, she's finally honest with herself, clearly admitting that she's going to be gone for a very long time. However, in these last moments, her only wish is that her husband won't lie to her in the last moments, telling her that it'll only be a couple weeks that she's gone, while handing her a fur coat that she won't need till winter. Immediately after this wish, Judith's husband Fritz arrives home and can tell that she's been packing. Judith announces that she's leaving, but Fritz assures her that there's no reason to leave, telling her everything's going to be okay, that he hasn't changed, nor has his desire to be with her changed. After embracing each other, Fritz compromises that Judith leaving would be safest, and Judith tells Fritz of Gertrude coming over to care for him. Sadly, however, Fritz immediately tells Judith that Gertrude coming is unnecessary, since Judith would obviously only be gone for a few weeks, as he hands her the fur coat that she wouldn't need till winter. This final performance is incredibly depressing. The audience has to watch as Judith does everything in her power to make her leave as comfortable as possible for her husband. She sacrifices every relationship she has, starting from those most distant to her to those who were closest to her. And Judith's only last wish to herself was that he wouldn't lie to her face while she leaves. Therefore, through the technique of slowly stripping away these relationships, the audience sees just how destructive the need to lie in a society is, and how it strips away every relationship, even the relationship you have with yourself.